The night pressed heavy, suffocating the city in rain and smoke. The narrow alley glistened with oil-slick puddles as Jade shoved the gurney forward, its wheels shrieking against broken pavement. Every squeal echoed like a beacon. Her heart pounded with every push, with every labored breath that misted into the cold. On the gurney lay Chris. His face pale, hollowed by months in a coma, tubes threading from beneath his collar into the machines that sustained him. His chest rose and fell shallowly, mechanically, like a clock winding down. He looked almost lifeless, yet Jada refused to see him that way. Almost there, she whispered, though he could not hear her. "I won't let them take you. Not again." But fate had already closed its jaws. Shadows split from the darkness at both ends of the alley. Headlights flared, bathing them in stark, merciless light. Black sedans rolled forward like predators hemming prey into a corner. Figures stepped out, men in tailored suits, movements crisp, rehearsed. They didn't shout. They didn't run. They simply closed in with the patience of hunters who knew the kill could not escape. Jada gripped the revolver at her waist. Her hand trembled as she leveled it, her body shielding Chris' still form. "Stay back." Her voice cracked, desperation outweighing defiance. One man tilted his head, unimpressed. Another gave a sharp signal with his hand. The world blurred. A strike to her wrist sent the revolver clattering into the puddles. A second blow collapsed her to her knees, pain tearing through her ribs. Hands seized her arms, twisting until she cried out. "Don't touch him!" She screamed, thrashing as they wheeled Chris away. His limp body jostled with each bump of the gurney, the machines clattering beside him. The sight split Jada in two. She fought like a wild animal, teeth, nails, kicks, but they dragged her with brutal ease. By the time the convoy pulled out of the alley, both Jada and Chris were bound in separate cars. One conscious, broken, and gagged, the other comatose, unaware of the nightmare unfolding around him. The mansion loomed above the storm, its windows gleaming faintly like watchful eyes. Jada was thrown into the cellar, the smell of damp stone and rust choking her. Heavy chains snapped around her wrists, tethering her to the wall. She screamed his name into the silence. "Chris." The only answer was her own echo. Above, Chris was wheeled into the medical wing. His body was transferred from the battered gurney onto a pristine hospital bed surrounded by humming machines. Doctors she didn't recognize leaned over him, their movements brisk, efficient, impersonal. One adjusted the tubes feeding into his arm. Another checked the monitors without ever looking at his face. Chris remained still, breathing, but unaware, alive, but not living. Hours later, the cellar door groaned open. Heavy footsteps descended. The Patriarch emerged from the shadows, his tall frame rigid, his face carved into stone. His eyes didn't blaze like Madam's. No, his gaze was colder, calculating. He stopped before her, hands folded behind his back. "Why?" The word fell like a blade into the silence. "Why did you hide him?" Jada's lips trembled. She lifted her chained hands as if they could shield her. "Because he's my brother. Because if I left him with you, with her, he would have been nothing but." Her voice broke, the words strangled by grief. "Nothing but meat." The Patriarch's jaw tightened, but his face betrayed nothing. "You let my son die," he said flatly. "And for what?" "For this." He gestured toward the ceiling, where Chris lay hooked to machines. Tears streamed down Jada's face. "I never wanted Jin to die. I wanted him to live knowing Chris was safe. I wanted to protect them both. I was wrong, God, I was wrong, but I did it out of love, not malice." The Patriarch's silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, he turned away, his voice quiet but sharp as glass. "Love is weakness." He left her in the dark. Later, when the cellar door creaked again, Jada expected the Patriarch. But it was Madam who entered, her silks brushing the cold stone, her face half shrouded by the candle she carried. She dismissed the guards with a flick of her hand. The door closed. The two women were alone. Madam crouched before Jada, her perfume heavy, her eyes gleaming with something between triumph and madness. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Tell me, Child, do you really want to know the truth of Jin's death? Jada's blood ran cold. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Madam's smile curved sharp as a blade. Or do you prefer the lie that comforts you? The candle guttered. The cellar swallowed them both in shadow. The cell was suffocating. Moisture bled from the stone walls, turning the floor into a slick mirror that reflected the dim light of the candle someone always left outside the bars. Jada sat with her knees pulled to her chest, the iron shackles biting into her wrists. Her body was sore, but worse was the silence, the kind that pressed on her ears until she could hear her own heart hammering, the kind that made her remember. Chris' shallow breathing hooked up to machines upstairs. Jin's smile, faint and weary, before it was swallowed by the sound of a gunshot. Her failure. Every night the images came, weaving themselves into nightmares that refused to end when she woke. Tonight was no different. Her whisper echoed faintly against the walls. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't. It wasn't my fault. The heavy door creaked open. Jada flinched, heart leaping. Down the stairs floated the madam, her presence filling the cellar before she even reached the last step. She carried a candle, its flickering flame carving sharp shadows across her face, revealing beauty preserved through cruelty. High cheekbones, lips painted dark, eyes like daggers. Her silk gown whispered against the stone, entirely out of place in this dungeon yet somehow commanding it. She stopped before the bars, her poise immaculate, and let her gaze settle on Jada. Still awake, Madam said softly, voice rich as velvet. Good. I wanted you clear-headed. Jada forced herself to sit straighter, though the chains clinked accusingly. Why are you here? I sent it enough to lock me up like an animal? Madam tilted her head, her expression unreadable. An animal? No. You're something far more fascinating. A girl who threw herself into a war she never understood, willing to destroy everything to save a boy who was never hers to save. Anger flared through Jada, sharp and brief. Chris is my brother. I'd die for him. Madam's lips curved into a cruel smile. Yes, I know. That's what makes you predictable. Dangerous, in a sense. But also pliable. She stepped closer, lowering the candle so that the glow lit Jada's pale face. You tell yourself a story every night, don't you? Madam's voice was almost tender now. That Jin loved your brother so much he couldn't bear the guilt. That he put the gun to his own head to buy Chris another chance. A noble tale. A tragic one. Jada's throat tightened. Because it's true. No, Madam whispered, crouching slightly so that her eyes were level with Jada's. It's a shield. A lie you clutch because it's the only thing keeping you from drowning in guilt. The words burrowed under her skin. I saw him. You heard him, Madam cut sharply, her tone slicing through the air. Think, child. Did you see the bullet leave the chamber? Did you see his body fall? Or were you ushered away, blinded by grief, told what to believe? Jada's breath hitched. She remembered the chaos that night, the staff moving with uncanny precision, the way no one let her linger, how she had been told of Jin's death rather than witnessing it herself. Her voice faltered. I heard the gun. I heard. And I told you it was suicide, Madam said calmly, rising to her full height again. Everyone did, because that's the narrative I wove for you. And you swallowed it whole, desperate little creature that you are. Tears blurred Jada's vision. Why? Why would you lie about something like that? Why would you take his life and make it? Because usefulness is what matters, Madam said simply, her words cutting clean, merciless. Jin's death, framed as suicide, was useful. It made you weak. It made you malleable. It gave me silence where there might have been resistance. Her hand brushed over the bars, her nails tapping the iron rhythmically, like a predator measuring its prey. Do you want to know the truth? She asked. Do you want me to lay bare what really happened? Jada's entire body trembled, though she forced the words out. Tell me. Madam leaned in, her shadow stretching monstrous on the wall behind her. Her whisper was a dagger cloaked in silk. Jin didn't kill himself. He was shot. By my order. And the story of suicide was the perfect veil. The air left Jada's lungs. She choked, her body folding inward as if struck. Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. "No, no, you're lying." "I don't lie," Madam murmured. "I deal in truths sharpened into weapons. And you, poor girl, have been living in a theater I designed." She straightened, the candlelight painting her face in shifting gold and shadow. "Sleep well, Jada. Dream of your djinn, the noble fool. But remember, the only thing that mattered to me was that his blood bought me silence. Everything else is sentiment." With that, Madam turned, the train of her gown whispering over the damp floor as she climbed the stairs. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the cell whole. And Jada screamed, her voice raw, tearing through the silence. It wasn't grief alone this time, it was the sound of truth breaking her in half. The next day bled slowly. Jada hadn't slept, couldn't. Her mind clawed at itself, replaying Madam's words over and over until they carved grooves in her skull. Shot. My order. Not suicide. Every sound outside her cell made her jump. The clatter of trays. The low voices of guards. Even the soft drip of water from the ceiling. Everything reminded her that somewhere above, Chris was still alive but fading, alive only because Madam chose to keep him that way. The door opened again. Jada's body tensed, chains rattling as she sat upright. Madam descended slowly, deliberately, holding no candle this time, as though she knew her silhouette alone was enough to command fear. In her hand was a glass of deep red wine, its surface catching what little light seeped from the hallway. "You look unwell," she observed, voice smooth as silk. "Did the truth rob you of sleep?" Jada spat weakly at the ground. Her lips trembled. "You're lying. You killed him because he was inconvenient," Madam finished, lowering herself gracefully onto a wooden stool a servant had set by the bars. She crossed her legs, elegant as if she were at a salon and not in a dungeon. Jinn carried too much honor in his veins. Men like that are fragile. They break against the world because they refuse to bend. Jada's eyes burned. "He was loyal to you. To your family. He would have died for Chris." "Exactly," Madam replied, swirling her wine. "That was the problem. Loyalty to sentiment. He would have exposed everything to protect you and the boy. And I cannot tolerate liabilities, no matter how devoted." The words hit like blows. But Madam wasn't done. "You still don't understand, do you?" Her smile was gentle, condescending. "You think this is about cruelty, about me being some monster in silk. But no, child. This is business. Cold, necessary, and profitable business." Jada frowned through her tears. "Business." Madam leaned forward, her voice lowering to an intimate murmur. "Chris is not just a patient. Not just a comatose boy suspended between life and death. He is an asset. An investment." Jada's stomach turned. "He's my brother." "To you, yes," Madam conceded with a slight tilt of her head. "But to my network, he is a body with rare, viable organs. Do you know how much a healthy heart fetches on the private market? How many desperate men of power cling to life with failing lungs or kidneys? How much a billionaire would pay to live 1 year longer?" Jada shook her head violently. "Stop it. Has not some." "Spare me the outrage," Madam snapped, her patience thinning. She placed the wine glass down carefully on the stone, the stem ringing faintly. "You think this world values human life for its poetry? For its stories? No. It values what can be extracted, harvested, repurposed. Flesh is currency. Blood is commodity. And Chris is prime stock." Jada's breath came ragged. "That's why you kept him alive. Not out of mercy. Not because you cared." Madam's smile returned, chilling in its serenity. "I care only for numbers. His coma made him the perfect vessel. Preserved. Managed. Timed, like ripened fruit awaiting the harvest." Jada's chains rattled as she lunged forward, slamming against the bars. "You're insane. You killed Jinn to cover this? To silence him?" Jinn found out about Chris. He somehow, Knew Chris was alive and also what I wanted to do with him. So I had to silence him, right before he said something stupid. I took the perfect opportunity. The letter, the suicide scene, everything was me. I mean, he is my stepson after all. Couldn't care less. The weight of her words settled heavy in the air. Jada sank back, tears streaming freely now, her voice hoarse. You're a monster. Madam reached for her wine again, sipping leisurely, unaffected. No, she said softly, her gaze cold and unwavering. I am profitable. The silence that followed was unbearable. Jada curled into herself, sobbing into her chained hands. Above them, faintly, the hum of machines echoed from the medical wing. Chris' fragile existence tethered not to hope, but to transaction. And for the first time, Jada realized the scope of what she was up against. This wasn't madness. It wasn't vengeance. It was empire. Days blurred into each other in the basement. No sunlight, no clocks, only the measured footsteps of guards and the occasional scrape of metal when food was shoved inside. Jada had stopped counting the hours. Only Chris mattered. She lived by the faint, mechanical echoes from above, the steady hum of ventilators, the rhythmic hiss of oxygen, the distant beeping of monitors that reached her through the vents like ghostly lullabies. As long as she heard them, she knew he was still alive. But then, one morning, the air shifted. The footsteps weren't the usual guards. They were heavier, slower, deliberate. Two shadows stretched across the cell as the door creaked open. And then he stepped inside. The Patriarch. Jada's throat tightened. She had seen him before, of course, tall, immovable, the air around him as still as a blade before the strike. But here in the dimness of the cellar, he seemed carved from stone. His black coat draped across his shoulders, his silvered hair neatly combed, his expression unreadable as ever. The guards stayed back. Only he moved forward. Leave us, he said, voice flat, carrying authority that allowed no hesitation. The guards exchanged quick looks, then withdrew. The cell door closed again, leaving Jada and the Patriarch alone in the cold silence. He didn't sit. He stood just outside the bars, his eyes fixed on her with something colder than accusation, scrutiny. Why? He asked at last. No preamble. No softness. Just that one word, dropped like a stone into the well of silence. Jada swallowed, her chains clinking as she pushed herself upright. Why what? Why hide the boy? Why let Jin die? His tone carried no grief, no anger, just blunt inquiry, as though he were dissecting a business transaction gone wrong. Jada's lips trembled. The weight of Jin's memory pressed down on her chest. But this was her chance. If anyone could stop Madam, it was him. She forced herself to meet his gaze. Because if you knew Chris was alive, he would have been used, exploited. I was trying to protect him. To protect your son. The Patriarch's eyes narrowed slightly, but his face gave nothing away. And Jin? Her voice cracked. Jin didn't kill himself. He didn't. Something flickered in the Patriarch's gaze, a fracture, barely perceptible. Explain. Jada leaned forward, chains rattling, her words tumbling out with urgency. Your wife. Madam. She killed him. She made it look like suicide. Because he would have stood against her. Because he would have exposed what she's really doing to Chris. The Patriarch's silence was suffocating. His eyes bore into hers, dissecting every word, every tremor of her voice. Finally, he spoke. And what, exactly, is she doing? Jada's breath came shallow. She hesitated, then said it. She's running an organ trafficking network. Chris isn't under treatment. Hes inventory. His coma is being maintained because there's a client, a powerful one, who's waiting for his organs. Jin was murdered because he would have stopped her. The words echoed in the stone chamber, raw and desperate. But the Patriarch did not react. No flare of rage, no horror. Only the faintest arch of a brow. Do you have proof? Jada froze. Her chains felt suddenly heavier. Her heart raced, searching desperately for something, anything. But all she had were whispers, stolen words through vents, scraps of suspicion, Madam's cruel confession. Nothing tangible. Nothing that could stand against Madam's precision and power. Her silence was her answer. The Patriarch's jaw tightened. He exhaled slowly, as though disappointed. You expect me to believe the hysterics of a guilty girl locked in chains? His voice remained calm, but beneath it lay a blade's edge. You claim my wife would murder her son, sell his brother piece by piece, and run an empire beneath my roof, yet you bring me no evidence. Only grief. No! Jada cried, lunging forward, her hands scraping against the bars until her skin split. I swear it. I heard her, I saw, she admitted it. She killed Jin, and Chris is next. Please, you have to listen. The Patriarch's eyes narrowed. For the first time, Jada thought she saw a crack in the mask, not belief, but something more dangerous, suspicion. He turned away, his coat whispering as he moved toward the door. Without proof, he said coldly, your words are nothing. The door creaked open. Light spilled across the floor. He paused, half-turned, his profile cast in shadow. And if you lie to me, he added softly, your suffering will make death a mercy. Then he was gone. The door shut. The cellar plunged back into darkness. Jada collapsed against the wall, chest heaving, tears burning her face. She had tried. She had risked everything. And it wasn't enough. But in that moment, between the sobs, she understood something crucial. Words wouldn't save Chris. Not hers. Not here. If she wanted to protect him, if she wanted to expose Madam, she would need evidence. Proof undeniable, sharp as a knife, heavy as a chain. And from that realization, a spark of determination flickered in her broken heart. She would find it. Even from her cage. The Patriarch's visit left Jada shaken, but not broken. His words echoed inside her head like iron hammers. Without proof, your words are nothing. She repeated them to herself until the meaning hardened. Proof. She needed proof. The cell became both her prison and her battlefield. She studied every sound, every flicker of movement in the dim corridor outside. The guards were machines, rigid, predictable, loyal only to orders. But the servants. Servants carried guilt in their steps. They whispered when they thought no one listened. And in a house that large, whispers were currency. It began with the food. Every day, a tray appeared through the bars, bread, broth, sometimes fruit. Usually delivered by a faceless hand. But one evening, a nervous young maid lingered too long. Her eyes darted between Jada and the corridor, and for the briefest moment, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak. Jada seized it. Please, she whispered, her voice ragged but steady. My brother. Chris. Tell me if he's safe. The maid froze, torn between fear and pity. Finally, in the barest murmur, she replied, he is alive. But there are men I don't know. Foreigners. Doctors, they say. They stay upstairs with him all hours. Her eyes flicked toward the stairwell as though the shadows themselves were listening. Do not trust the lady. Do not trust anyone. Before Jada could press further, the maid shoved the tray in hastily and fled. It wasn't much. But it was something. That night, Jada pressed her ear to the vent near the ceiling. Sounds drifted faintly through the ductwork, footsteps, muffled voices. Most meaningless. But patience was a weapon she had learned long ago. And finally, it paid off. The jet must be ready by month's end, a man's voice said, smooth, professional, tinged with weariness. The fixer. Then Madam's sharper tone, and make sure the clinic is sterilized. The client will not tolerate error. He pays for perfection. Jada's blood ran cold. She covered her mouth, stifling her breath as the conversation continued. The boy? The fixer asked. He remains stable, Madam replied. Our doctors ensure it. That is all that matters. He is not a brother. He is an asset. And soon, he will be payment. The words slid like knives into Jada's chest. Chris wasn't a patient. He wasn't being healed. He was being preserved, maintained like a specimen, a body to be harvested. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to remember every word. Days passed. Jada became sharper, hungrier. Every scrap of information mattered. When the head maid, Hannah, brought in linens one morning, she dropped a folded paper without noticing. Jada's hands darted through the bars, snatching it before it touched the ground. It was part of a ledger. Faded ink, half-torn, but legible. Medical equipment delivery, respiratory units, transfusion kits, surgical blades, refrigeration units. This wasn't equipment for care. It was preparation. Jada clutched the page as though it were holy scripture. Proof. Not enough to damn Madam outright, but enough to point toward the truth. That night, she pried a loose board in the corner of her cell and hid the paper beneath it. Kneeling on the cold stone, she clasped Chris' locket in her hands and whispered into the darkness. Hold on. Just hold on a little longer. I'll bring the truth to light. But upstairs, Madam was already tightening the noose. In her chambers, she paced slowly, her silks whispering across the carpet. Hannah stood trembling at the door as Madam's words cut sharp. She grows too quiet, Madam said. Too observant. The girl listens when she should despair. Hannah lowered her gaze. Shall I silence her? Madam stopped, turning her gaze like a blade. Her smile was thin, terrifying. Yes, she whispered. If she makes noise, silence her. Permanently. The days blurred into each other, grey stone, stale air, the scrape of trays across the floor. But inside Jada, something had changed. She was no longer just surviving. She was waiting, listening, sharpening. Every night, she pressed her ear to the vent. Sometimes she caught fragments, footsteps, murmurs of deals, the dull groan of the old mansion shifting in its bones. But then, one night, the silence broke. The fixer's voice. Low, steady. He spoke like a man born in the dark. The arrangements are confirmed. The client arrives in 2 weeks. A pause. Then the creak of a chair, and Madam's cool reply. Good. Ensure his discretion is rewarded. Double his fee if necessary. This is not a transaction. It is an empire. And empires collapse without loyalty. The fixer shifted, uneasy. And the girl? Jada's heart stopped. Madam's tone sharpened like glass. She is a nuisance, not a threat. A cage makes even the loudest bird forget how to sing. Should she grow bold, I will clip her wings myself. Their voices faded into silence. But Jada remained frozen, every muscle stiff. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until Chris stopped being her brother and became parts. She had to act. The next morning, when the timid maid slipped her food through the bars, Jada thrust out her hand. In her palm lay the only treasure she had left, her mother's ring. Gold, worn, engraved with a name that no longer mattered. Take this, Jada whispered fiercely. Bring it to the Patriarch. Tell him I have proof. Tell him his wife is selling his son's flesh. The maid's eyes widened in terror. I can't, if she finds out. You must, Jada pressed, shoving the ring into her hand. If you do nothing, Chris dies. And when he dies, so do I. Please. For mercy's sake. The maid trembled, then nodded once. Her hands vanished with the tray, the ring hidden inside. Hope flickered in Jada's chest for the first time in weeks. That hope lasted less than a day. By dusk, the courtyard filled with whispers. Jada rose to her barred window, straining for a view. Below, the timid maid knelt on the cobblestones, her face streaked with tears. Guards circled her like vultures. And Madam stood tall at the center, her black silks rippling like storm clouds. This girl, Madam announced coldly, has stolen from the family. A thief deserves no shelter. The maid's pleas rose into the night. No, please. I only. The crack of a gunshot silenced her forever. Jada staggered back from the window, bile rising in her throat. She covered her mouth, but the scream clawed its way out anyway. The sound echoed off the stone walls, useless, empty. The courtyard emptied. The blood remained. That night, Jada curled on her cot, guilt crushing her chest. I killed her. I sent her to her death. But when she rolled over, something crinkled beneath her blanket. She froze, then carefully pulled it free. A scrap of paper, folded small. Her hands shook as she opened it. Ledger entries. Numbers, codes, shipments. Hidden inside the maid's tray lining, smuggled to her even in death. Her vision blurred with tears. The woman hadn't failed her. She had tried. She had given her everything she could. Jada pressed the page to her chest, sobbing into the silence. It wasn't enough to topple Madam's empire, but it was a spark. And sparks, if guarded, could grow into fire. She returned to the loose floorboard, hiding the new scrap with the first. Her voice trembled as she whispered into the darkness. I will not waste what you gave me, Chris. I swear on her blood, I will bring this to light. But upstairs, Madam sat alone at her desk, swirling wine in a crystal glass. Her eyes were calm, almost serene, as she murmured to the fixer standing nearby. The girl grows desperate. Desperation breeds mistakes. And mistakes are easier to bury than corpses. The fixer nodded once. Jada had taken her first step, and Madam was already waiting to break her. Time became Jada's enemy. The ledger scraps hidden beneath her floorboard weren't just numbers anymore. They were chains binding her to a countdown she couldn't stop. Every night, she replayed the words she had overheard. 2 weeks. Now, it was less than 1. Chris still lay suspended between life and death. Each time she was allowed to pass his room during guarded transfers, her chest clenched at the sight of him. Pale, motionless, machines breathing in his place. His body was a prison. His silence was a scream. She pressed her palm against the glass separating them and whispered, "Hold on, Chris. Just hold on." But the only answer was the steady beep of a machine. The Patriarch visited once more that week. He came late at night, when the house was asleep. His shoulders seemed heavier, his face more hollow, as though the weight of 100 unspoken suspicions pressed down on him. He stood before her cell, staring through the bars. "You still insist my wife is plotting against us?" Jada gripped the bars, desperation in her eyes. "Not plotting, selling. She's running something vast. A network. Chris isn't safe, not because of his illness, but because of her business. Please, you have to believe me." The Patriarch's eyes narrowed, but doubt clouded his gaze. "Do you have proof?" Her hand twitched toward the loose floorboard beneath her cot. She almost blurted it out, almost shoved the ledger scraps into his hands. But a voice inside stopped her cold. What if Hes not ignorant? What if Hes playing a role? What if giving him the papers destroys everything? She hesitated, lips trembling. "Not yet. But I will." He studied her for a long, painful moment. Then he turned, footsteps echoing into the hall. For the first time, Jada wondered, was he a man blinded by love, or a man hiding behind it? That night, she couldn't sleep. Shadows twisted across her walls as she paced the length of her cage. She whispered the plan she had rehearsed 100 times. She couldn't wait for rescue. She couldn't wait for trust. The ledger wasn't evidence if it stayed hidden in the dark. It had to reach someone beyond these walls, someone Madam couldn't silence. But she had no allies left. The maid's death had proved that. Still, desperation has a way of sharpening courage. Jada began scratching into the ledger scraps, turning numbers into a crude, desperate letter. Words scrawled in broken ink. Chris is alive but in danger. Madam is selling him. Here are the records. Help us. She folded the scraps into a tiny square and tucked it under her sleeve. Tomorrow, she decided, she would risk everything. The next tray, the next guard, the next chance to slip this note into the world, she would take it, no matter the cost. But Madam had been watching. The following evening, as Jada crouched by the floorboard, checking the scraps one last time, a shadow darkened her cell. The door creaked open, and Madam herself stepped inside. No guards. No audience. Just her. In her hand gleamed a silver key. Jada's heart stuttered. Madam smiled, but it was the smile of a viper. "You're restless, child. I can feel it. Birds in cages always peck harder when the bars rattle. But sooner or later, they bloody their own beaks. She moved closer, her perfume cloying, her eyes sharp. Tell me, Jada, have you discovered something worth dying for? Jada froze. Her sleeve itched with the hidden note. Every breath threatened to betray her. Madam leaned close enough that Jada felt the warmth of her whisper. Chris clock runs out in 3 nights. If you think you can stop me, I suggest you try. Watching you fail will be exquisite. The door clicked shut. The key turned. Jada sank to the floor, chest heaving. Her hands shook as she pressed against the ledger scraps beneath her sleeve. 3 nights. That was all. The clock wasn't ticking anymore. It was roaring. The cell door creaked open with a groan that sounded like thunder in Jada's ears. She froze, heart hammering, waiting for shouts, footsteps, discovery. But none came. The key Hannah had slipped her had worked. Her body shook, but she moved. The corridor stretched like a throat swallowing her alive. Every step, every breath, felt like trespass. Shadows lunged at her from the walls. She pressed herself flat as 2 guards strode past, her pulse so loud she feared it would give her away. Finally, she reached the medical wing. Chris lay on a bed of white sheets, bound to life by tubes and machines. His chest rose and fell, shallow, fragile. His skin had gone pale, his lips dry, his once strong frame now gaunt. Jada's hands trembled as she touched his face. Chris. I'm here. I'll get you out, I swear. His fingers twitched, the faintest movement. Hope struck her like a knife. He wasn't gone. Not yet. She bent closer, whispering through her tears. Just hold on. Then the door slammed shut. Jada spun around, and froze. Madam. Her figure was cut in moonlight, elegant in a silk robe, a wine glass in hand like this was a stage she'd been waiting for. Well, Madam said softly, her lips curving. The little mouse gnawed through her bars. Jada staggered backward, clutching the papers hidden in her sleeve. You won't win. Madam's laugh was low, cruel. Show them what? Scribbles? Shadows? Who do you think they'll believe? The girl who lied about a death? Or the woman who rules this house? She raised her hand. 2 guards surged into the room, guns drawn, boots striking the floor like thunder. Jada's breath tore out of her chest. She ripped the scraps from her sleeve, holding them high. Her voice cracked but didn't falter. Then let him decide. Let who decide? The new voice silenced the room like a blade. The Patriarch. He stood in the doorway, broad shoulders blocking the light, eyes sharp with suspicion. He took in the scene, Chris bound to machines, guards with guns, his wife calm as stone, and Jada shaking but defiant with paper clenched in her fist. What is this? His voice was thunder. Explain. Now. The guards hesitated, lowering their guns. Jada's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself upright. She thrust the papers forward with both hands, her voice raw with desperation. Look at him. She pointed at Chris, tears burning her eyes. Hes not being healed. Hes being prepared. She's selling him, piece by piece, to her clients. The Patriarch's stare shifted slowly toward Madam. His jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, the silence was unbearable. But Madam only stepped closer, her smile never breaking. She set her wine glass down with a soft clink. Husband, she purred, her voice velvet over steel. Do you believe the hysteria of a girl who defied your house? Or the wife who has stood at your side, building everything you own? The red wine dripped from the overturned glass, spreading across the floor like blood. The guards waited. Jada trembled. Chris breathed shallowly. The Patriarch's shadow filled the room, caught between truth and ruin.